Hate incident transgender identity is an incident that is perceived by the victim or any other person to have been perpetrated on the grounds of malice or ill will against someone's transgender identity. Such a transgender identity can be actual or perceived. It includes transsexual people, transvestite people, intersex people, and anyone who has a gender identity which is not simply a standard male or female gender identity. For example, a hate incident transgender identity would be recorded if a person who was assaulted because they were perceived to be temporarily cross-dressing, or if they were assaulted because they were perceived to have undergone gender reassignment.
My name's Alana Strain. I'm also a male to female transsexual. I'm what they call pre-op. I haven't completed the transition process, although I'm very close to it. I'm just waiting on word from the surgeon to actually get the operations and get those completed, and then got on with moving on with my life. I was born in the early 50s, so yeah, I've had a life. I had a male life. I had a good male life, to be quite honest. But when I was approximately the early 40s, I discovered the internet, and I discovered there were other people like me. And through talking to others, I realised, yeah, I wasn't alone, and I could actually put labels to what I was feeling. In those days, the very early days, we had very famous people who were transitioning, or they became famous because of the media. It was a new concept, it was a new phenomenon, so it attracted a lot of publicity. I knew I was very similar to those people, but it wasn't until later you started actually digging into it, and I found out what the true meaning of being a transsexual actually is. Again, it was early days, hormone therapies and surgeries were just starting to come out and start to improve. I suppressed being different from a way back when I was about 4 years old, when I actually realised I was different. And during that journey, again, it was just total suppression. Because I was born just after the war years, things were actually different then. And if you were born male, you were expected to be male. There was no dubiety about it. You had to live that life. To live anything differently actually meant more than ridicule and scorn. In certain cases, it could have actually threatened your life. So you suppressed the differences. I mean, gay people in those days weren't accepted either, and that was a much more well-known phenomenon, I feel like, than being transsexual. Since then, it took me about almost 8 years, 9 years to accept who I was, and in that period of time, I read about it, I talked to different people, and I finally decided that was the life that I wanted. That's the life I always should have had. I mean, like Alex has mentioned previously, you went to bed at night praying to God that the following morning you would be a girl when you woke up, and you wouldn't have to have all these bits that weren't right for you. I began my transition almost 7 years ago now, when I first started taking the hormones. At first, I didn't want to go down the surgical route. I didn't feel as though I had to go down the surgical route. But as time went on, that feeling actually came to the fore. And approximately just over a year ago, a year and a half ago, I decided the transition route was the only one for me. And I had to get down the surgical side of it to actually change myself physically. Since then, it's been like a roller coaster, but unfortunately, getting that peace of mind for myself. I've lost my wife after 32 years of marriage. I've now lost my house. I have lost my 3 children, and I've actually lost my 3 grandchildren, as well as a big section of my family. So yeah, there are benefits to personally to transitioning, but there's a lot of heartache involved with this, and it's not an easy decision, and we don't make these decisions lightly. I haven't actually been subjected to physical violence. Mine's been actually more on the mental side of things. People have, been making phone calls and making rude remarks over the phone, and just probably because they haven't got the nerve to stand up in front of me. I reported these crimes. I did report them. So that happened actually twice on the telephone. On another occasion, when I was seeing someone off in their car, then a car came flying by on the main road, which is just next to where I used to live, and the driver shouting the word freak. And again, they haven't got the nerve to stand up and actually say that to my face. The worst incident that I ever actually came across was not from strangers, it was actually family related. And I was getting called a freak by members of my family. Now, the initial impact, it wasn't nice, but it wasn't until later on that I started questioning everything about myself and what I was doing, and was it right? And it really turned my mind back into myself, and I felt myself becoming introverted. So much so that the thoughts of suicide actually ran through my mind. I realised by transitioning and coming out that I was hurting my family. Although they appeared to accept it at the start, it didn't turn out that way. And I then, after all, a certain period of time of what I thought was acceptance and all this turmoil going through my head, I then was subjected to a lot of mental abuse by my whole family. And again, the thoughts of taking my own life became predominant. So much so that I had to go to the doctor and ask them for drugs and what have you to try and get over this problem. The doctor saw the condition I was in and actually refused, because they thought it was so bad that I may actually take my life, and they weren't going to give me the weapons for it. In this instance, when it's family, I never reported anything, because they were family. I had brought them up. I'd been the male member of the family for so long that I still had that protective environment I wanted to keep them in, even though they were hurting me, even though they were trying to kill me. And that is probably one of the worst things I've ever really came across during my transition. I'm expecting in the future to make things better for others, but I'm not actually holding back and saying that nothing will ever happen to me again. I do expect the worst, and these incidents have built up a sort of thick skin to handle what life's going to throw at me, and I just don't know what's around the next corner, but I'm getting prepared for it. Probably one of the first incidents I ever came across, when I first came out, I was actually with Alex, and we were in a pub in Falkirk, which was a fairly safe pub. We'd been here a few times before, and there was this drunk who was actually quite a bit of a lech. He was looking for girls to pick up, and he was going round various tables. And it came to where Alex and I were sitting now. Unfortunately, she'd went to the toilet, and this guy sat down and looked at me and then walked away. And from about 5 or 6 feet away, he says, "It's all right, you're okay. I know you're still a guy." Now, I didn't report that because the guy was drunk. And what would be the point of it? It wasn't going to solve a problem. And it was actually, it hurt me. It didn't hurt me at the time. I sort of dismissed it. I laughed it off, and I told Alex about it. We sort of laughed it all off. But it stayed with me for weeks. And it was actually probably the first incident I ever came across, and it started that thickening of the skin process. So everything else that has been happened subsequent to all that has been built up in layers. And I feel as though because I'm transsexual, I'm having to build these layers and isolate myself from a lot of emotional things that would hurt me. And I do have to stop experiencing them, or else I'm going to get hurt even more. And I'm not prepared to go through all that. As I said, when it's concerning almost outside parties, strangers and what have you, yes, I will report them. I will have absolutely no hesitation in reporting. And on the incidents I have reported, I got help from the police and from victim support. Now, I don't actually classify myself as being a victim, so I didn't take up their offer of support. I didn't feel I needed it. By now, or by that time, I was a stronger person. When I do come across incidents from other people who tell me what's been happening to them, I encourage them to actually report anything untoward, anything that's abusive, for the simple reason that, having worked with the police now for quite a period of time, they need the information on perhaps an intelligence level so that they can actually pinpoint where the trouble spots are going to be. They can then add in their extra policing should they require it. They will put the resources into it, and they will try and control these incidents. A lot of people are still afraid to talk to the police. They feel as though the police won't understand them. They'll actually make remarks behind their back, and they will mock them. And from my discussions with the police, again over a period of time, this certainly will never ever happen. The police are more open to being criticised, and they actually not so much enjoy being criticised, but should you point out something wrong to them, they will take on board and they will try and actually do something about it. They know they're not perfect now, they accept they're not perfect, but the beauty is that they will try and fix any problem, or they will at least ask the questions and see why they don't understand what your problem is. I still am very reluctant to report on any crimes or even incidents which have been involved in the family, simply because they are my family. And one day I'm hoping they will accept me for what I am. And the last thing I want to do is actually just stir up trouble for them. So I do take these things on board. I do take them within myself. I live with it. I don't try and flog myself by saying everything's my fault. It's not my fault. It's the way people look at me. I try to act like a normal, reasonable human being. I try to overcome everyday problems, but there are some things I can't fix, and the way my family see me at this moment, I can't fix. I have become stronger when I've been working with the police because of their perceptions and their help in doing all these things. And Yeah, the police do make mistakes, and they admit nowadays to making mistakes, but they will rectify them, or they will try and sort them. So my point here is, if you have an incident, report it. Even if you don't have to give your name, address, and all the other details to follow up, let the police know that things are happening. That way they can control what's happening, or they can put the resource in, and perhaps maybe they'll improve your life and maybe actually improve my life.